This video is centered around Rasheed Wallace and Bonzi Wells giving their thoughts on Anthony Edwards and his comments. I haven't. Well, let me go ahead and like make this clear. My position on Anthony Edwards' statements, I think they're ignorant. And for people that like, I don't know, this could be like an objective opinion or a subjective opinion. But me personally, when I think something or someone is being ignorant, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world because I just think you're uninformed about the shit that you're talking about, and that's proof because I can be able to show the footage literally seconds before he made this comment that old dude is about to bring up. He literally pointed out the fact that he's never watched footage like that for him to really truly be aware of what he's about to say, and then he proceeds to say it anyway. That's ignorance at his biggest point. So my stance on Anthony Edwards' comments is that they were ignorant, they were uninformed, and especially like for the platform that he is building for himself in the NBA, I think it was very immature. Because you have to know that there's a lot of young kids that look up to Anthony Edwards as he progresses through the NBA hierarchy and throughout NBA history, that will take what he says and they actually value it. So when you say things like the 90s weren't that skilled, there are some young people that actually going to listen to what you said and they actually think that has validity, not understanding that you yourself are not knowledgeable of the 90s in itself. But I'm about to start this video.
Did y'all hear what Anthony Edwards had to say about really y'all's generation? More or less. He said, quote.
No, not Ant-Man.
Yeah, it was him.
Just saw
Quote.
Ant-Man. Not Ant-Man. Come on.
They say it was tougher back then than it is now, but I don't think anybody had skill back then. And referring to Michael Jordan, he said he was the only one that really had skill. You know what I mean? So that's why when they saw Kobe, they were like, oh my God. But now everybody has skill. End quote. That's from the Ant-Man. Magic responded, but what's you all's response to Anthony Edwards' quote? You said you just seen him, and now you talking crazy, man. What's this about?
Man, that's tough. You know, I like Ant-Man. I really do like Ant-Man. He's up next. He's going to be the face of the league for many years moving forward. But I just don't think that he understands that the game that these young boys got are just a reflection of the game that we had naturally that they've been taught. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of these people are athletic and all that stuff, but these skill set stuff, even if they really was keeping it real with their trainers, these trainers are watching film from our era and the stuff that we did, and they're just breaking it down into workouts. You know what I mean? They even naming cuts after people from our era, and they naming moves after people from our era.
Is that a bad thing, though? Like to watch these guys and try to emulate that?
No, I'm just saying, but to say they're not skilled when all your skills are coming from our era is tough. You know what I mean? But I just think Ant-Man, maybe they...
If you're new to the stream, the person that just finished speaking is Bonzi Wells. He was drafted in 98. He played all the way until 2008. So essentially his career goes throughout the span of the 2000s. The comment that Anthony Edwards made was towards the 90s primarily, but I digress. Nonetheless, he primarily did play, you know, whether it was college basketball, high school basketball, he did play in the 90s at a competent level, certainly a higher level than some of us, to where he actually got drafted into the NBA. So I don't mean to like cast aspersions on his opinion, but I do want to make it clear Bonzi falls under that category, much like Kevin Garnett, who were primarily dominant in the 2000s. That's primarily where their career span like goes throughout, like stretches out as far as NBA play. And they're the ones that are pointing out the skill argument to Anthony Edwards. That is not Anthony Edwards' argument. It is not towards the 2000s. It's towards the 90s. So I just wanted to point that out.
They might have misquoted him. Maybe he felt that type of way, but I think he got to really, truly understand the history of the game and understand the people that came before us, because the game was totally different when we played. You know what I'm saying? The game was physical. Like this game now, Don't get me wrong; these guys are skilled, but in our era, you wasn't able to show your full bag. You know what I mean? Like I know
Why?
my guy
Why couldn't
because
you show your full bag?
because it's different because you have.
I do want to point out also when he talks about a lot of the players today taking skill sets, like they're taking and like much like evolution is supposed to occur, they're basically just taking the blueprint that the prior era started upon, and they just further developed it to what it is to this point. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Most of the behind the backs, the between the legs, the craftiness, the creativity, all of that just expounded off of what prior eras did in the 2000s, the 90s, much like the 90s did to the 80s, the 70s, and so on and so forth. So I agree with that. However, I do want to point out this whole notion that physicality was the reason that you couldn't be able to do these ball handling drills, or you couldn't be able to expound upon your ball handling skills. That's not true. That is objectively not true. You know why I know that's not true? It's because a player like Reggie Miller was able to be one of the biggest focal point of one of the more dominant teams in the NBA in the 90s. And he never, and I mean never, expounded upon his ball dribbles much more than just one or two dribbles in a pull-up. That was as far as his skill set went. Am I lying, crazy?
No, that is facts. I'm really glad you brought up Reggie Miller.
A
Really
player
glad.
like Jeff Hornacek was able to be one of the more consistent offensive players on the Utah Jazz, and he did not have a bag, quote unquote. Neither did Dan Marley, a sharpshooter, but he did not have a bag. And I think an argument can be made. Joe Dumars didn't have a bag either. It was pretty standard. It was pretty standard. The most creativity you
Yeah,
got
he
from
was getting buckets. Facts.
yeah, he was getting buckets. But as far as him using ball handling to be able to create space, he was not doing that. You know what I'm saying? It was pretty cut and dry what he did. Same with even MJ. I would argue that MJ, even though he definitely is one of the more dominant, well, no, he arguably is the most dominant scorer we have ever seen in NBA history. A lot of his shot creation was built off of creating space via push off.
Right. What about casual Gary Payton? He's getting in the paint. I think he's probably the only one. Him and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf probably
I think
at the
point I
same
think
time.
point guards is where where the creativity mostly came through. But
Right.
again, if we're also being consistent, that was towards the back end of the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. Facts.
The
So who was doing it earlier?
I would say in the early
Isaiah Thomas.
90s, I think Isaiah Thomas for sure. He definitely expounded upon like the logic of how to control the ball. I also think Magic Johnson, for as safe as people and for as safe as he was in a half court setting, him in transition, he changed the way that transition play for a guard is viewed. I believe a player like Rod Strickland, I think he also deserves credit. Tim Hardaway, I definitely don't want to take away from him. You know what I'm saying? Like I think the point guard, you definitely have some arguments to be made, but once you get past and but I want to preference one, the point guards even some of them came in the back end of the 90s. And then two, that's still a small percentage of the league. What about the shooting guards, the small forwards, the power forwards, the centers? Because if we're being honest with ourselves, what we're seeing today by power forwards, such as, well, forget power forwards, what we're seeing today, as far as part of the reason why centers can be able to play power forward as well, and power forwards can be able to play center, is because they're versatile in their skill set which also happens to involve ball handling, is much more diverse than it was in the early 90s or the 90s in whole. What you see Karl Anthony Towns do on a day-to-day basis looks normal now, but it would look like witchcraft in the 90s. That's just a fact. What you see Anthony Davis, Giannis Antetokounmpo do in today's game, they wouldn't allow them to do that in the 90s. But I digress. I say all of that to say the main problem with the argument of physicality is it wasn't just physicality that kept you from being able to do those ball handling moves you see today. It was the fact that, one, you didn't have the creativity at that time because it didn't get expounded until the next era, and your coaches weren't allowing you to do that. And on top of that, you just weren't that skilled. Not that skilled. Compared to the skill set we see today, you're not that skilled. You're skilled,
Facts,
though.
man. Facts.
But let's continue on.
You have superstars, you have the stars of the team, and then you have everybody filling the role, kind of like it is now. But now everybody can shoot threes, everybody can get into their bag, everybody can do all these cone moves that they don't learn to get to their shot, basically to a jump shot or get to these different pretty moves. Like, we were from an era where we was taught to make the game look easy. You know what I mean? Like, if you got to give a guy 3 or 4 or 5 dribbles to get your shot off, man, he don't.
You just probably pass it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no. If you can get by me and if you can score on him in one dribble, or you can make it look like it's nothing, that's the era we're from. They want style points and want creative points where it's still a 2-point shot. It's still a 3-point shot, but they want it to look sweet, which I get it. That's their era, but we not from that era. You got to think, dudes was averaging 30
When he says that, he's cooking
out there. Dudes, holding you, fouling you, doing whatever they can to stop you. And they know you move, all this stuff. You still getting it off. Space and everything, it's all clogged up everywhere, and dudes still finding a way through that stuff. Now everything is spaced out, lanes are open, you can't touch people, you can get to the free throw line. So I think AAE just got to understand, man, this dudes that really done this stuff, and where this game is evolving to now is from our era and people that came before us as well, the Magic Johnson, the people, 'cause that's where we got it from. So it just kind of, it's like that. So I it's tough to hear him say that, but what these big wigs.
And I'm happy. I stop it here because I'm happy that he acknowledged the evolution part of it all, and even furthermore, I'm surprised that because you don't hear this a lot, delving into the actual basketball point of it all. Him talking about the physicality in the sense that the whole court was clogged up because it wasn't that much spacing. That's not something that is just like made up. That is an actual difficulty that they dealt with in the 90s, especially when illegal defenses started to be implemented. The whole plot of illegal defense and why it became such a stranglehold on the league, for especially when you go up against these phenomenal isolation and post players. The problem is when you send a double team, you either sent it or you didn't send it. There was no faking it. There was no pump faking. You either sent the double team or you didn't send the double team. And if you sent the double team, God forbid that person actually picks your double team apart, you're done. You're out of that play at that point. So people much rather felt like they would die on the hill of isolation, and that's where a player like Michael Jordan thrived, because I don't really have to, once I get past this defender, I don't have to worry about anybody else but the person that's sitting at the rim.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's 100% fact. That's
And
why
so,
MJ was cooking.
That's why MJ was cooking. I think in the early 90s, that's why, early to like 96, a player like Clyde Drexler was very potent. A player like Karl Malone deserves more credit in that sense on the offensive end, because I mean, it wasn't like it was like the easiest, but it definitely made it less difficult for a player like Karl Malone to be able to get some of those shots off, even with it being contested. It's not two hands; it's primarily one hand. And so, like, I think that and this goes back to the skill set, and I'll talk about this once we finish the video. but there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had with why the 90s struggled with a skill set, because it's not all about just ball handling. That's what I think people are sort of stuck on when he says no skill. He's thinking ball handling, tween behind the back, and there's other skill sets to the sport of basketball that I think the NBA in the 90s and prior they struggled with, and especially as the rules started to develop over the next few eras, it sort of demanded that the standard of skill had to evolve. But let's finish it.
He was saying and letting him know, like, bro, this stuff is deep. Don't, got to mind what you're saying a little bit.
Hey, I'll say this. I like Ant-Man too, but here's my thing. He's at this point in his career, in my opinion, he's not better than a Derek McKee. He's not better than a Grant Hill. He's not better than a Scottie Pippen. You know what I'm saying? As far as, and I'm just trying to name just a few wingmen from
I love
that.
Derek McKee,
but from that 90s era. But no, but again, I'm talking both sides of the ball now.
Yeah.
Derek McKee was a defender. He wasn't that, offense wasn't that great, but shit, the nigga, he would give you a good solid 14, 16, 18, which would hurt that team, but he was a solid defender.
But you gotta understand, hey, he only about 6'4".
Yeah,
So
true. But he's not a defender. And then, you know what I'm saying, if he was
he's an improving defender.
He's improving, but he's not that defender yet. Shit. And then again, he gotta let us know something. He's improving, but you get past them motherfucking Denver Nuggets. You know what I'm saying? You get past them. They right now, to me, they're the kings of the West. You get past them. Then
they just put them out, though. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they put them out, but they ain't win shit.
Somebody doing it again.
They ain't do nothing.
He on that cup again, man.
Rasheed's chatting, bro.
He on that cup again,
damn,
bro. Who's this Derek McKee guy?
Bro, Derek. About? Bro, all right. So, chat. I just want you guys to understand.
Defenders, man.
Derek, he wasn't even that much of a defender, but okay. He got drafted in '87 by Seattle, and then he went to Indiana. And then he finished his last year with Philadelphia in 2002. Derek McKee, his best season was in 88-89, his sophomore season, where he gave you 16 points per game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. 50% shooting, 34% from 3 on like 1 attempt. Got to the free throw line about 5 times. So a solid player. And if I'm correct on this unit, I believe they made it to the semifinals and got outed by the Lakers, in which he actually did pretty well. So I don't think he's a scrub, but he ain't Anthony Edwards.
Right, he ain't Ant-Man.
He ain't Ant-Man. He is not Anthony. He is not Anthony Edwards. I think that's crazy to say, especially after a postseason where Anthony Edwards comes into the postseason giving you 26, 5-5 on solid efficiency. And then he goes into the postseason and he upsticks that. And at this point, I don't think it's a discussion. This man is just a natural playoff riser, because he goes into the postseason and not only does he beat the crap out of the Phoenix Suns, he then goes into the Denver Nuggets series that people had the Denver Nuggets winning because the Timberwolves were quote unquote inexperienced, and he tears them a new hole. And then he goes against the Dallas Mavericks, and even with him not necessarily playing well, some people feeling like he didn't play well, he gave you 25, 9, and 8.
But that's the thing, though, Casual. Like, it's not his first. Is it? It's his first year in the playoffs, right?
No, this is his third year.
See, that's the thing, bro. Third year in the playoffs, they got film on you, bro, and you the best player. So they
it wasn't like he was a secret.
Man.
By the time he went up against the Denver Nuggets, they had already saw what he was capable of against the Phoenix Suns. They definitely game planned for him. And he still was able to go into that series specifically against the Denver Nuggets and give you 28, 5 and 6 on 50, 37, 50, 37, 85 splits. Like, what are we talking about here?
That's the series
respectfully,
where Cat was
Derek
killing,
McKee ain't Yeah, that was the series. Well, what was the series Cat was killing?
Yeah, I think so. Because Cat, I mean, they didn't. I'm not gonna say they shut down Ant, but they contained him to the point where like he
Nah, nah, nah,
wasn't
nah.
him like that.
This wasn't. Nah, this wasn't. Nah, you ain't talking about
This
Denver
wasn't
series.
it.
You talking about the Dallas series. Dallas
Yeah,
series
yeah,
and
yeah. I'm
Dallas.
talking about the Dallas one. That's
Yeah,
when
Dallas.
Cat was actually like,
Nah,
he
Cat
was
was
shooting.
trash.
No,
Cat was
both
trash.
of them.
Cat was trash. Anthony Edwards was fine.
I know. Cat had a series in that playoffs though.
He had a series against Phoenix, I believe.
That's it. He ain't show up.
No, no, no. It's not. He didn't show. He played well against Phoenix. He played well against Denver. He showed out against Phoenix, and then against Dallas, he just like his shooting splits just
So
plummeted.
against the Nuggets, he was right.
He was he was cool. He was cool. He was cool. He was cool. That being said, though, the everything that he's saying right now just speaks feeling because he's talking essentially about Anthony Edwards needs to beat the Denver Nuggets. He did that. Anthony Edwards isn't better
He's
than Derek McKee. He probably surpassed Derek McKee's expectations probably in his rookie
his
season.
rookie season, bro.
Like,
Like,
what are we
come
talking
on.
about here?
I'll take LaMelo over fucking Darren McKee.
I mean I'm interested for Rasheed to speak some level of
He's
perspective
hating.
or
He's turning into
knowledge
Shaq, man. He's
because
turning
right
into Shaq.
now it don't sound like he really knows what he's talking about. But
Nah,
let's see.
he don't, bro.
Let's see.
He's turning into
Stressed
Shaq.
out. They come. They
Wait, so how
come.
skilled
Shaq
would
is
you say
crazy.
Ant-Man is?
I like Ant-Man. Ant-Man's a skilled player, but I love his tenacity. I love the dog in him. I love what he's trying to become. But here's the thing: you also got to be respectful with it. You know what I'm saying? Just do your homework, do your history. Don't watch games, watch series. Don't just look at highlights. Highlights is going to show the best and the worst of everybody. You know what I'm saying? Highlights is going to show where in a series, if I'm matched up against one person and this person is averaging 30, the highlights going to show him every time him, scoring on me, hooks, jump shots, threes, this and that. But if you watch the game, you understand the game like, oh shit, well now I see why he got this 20 or 30 because he had to help out with this and that and do this and that.
They were shutting off this other guy.
Exactly. So now you see why instead of just going and just talking out the side of your neck. No, Cats, it would have been tougher for them because now they do have more offensive rules. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He think it's tough going to the hole now. No, shit, he would have been on the floor. It would have been a whole lot of this. Come on.
Yeah.
Let me help you up.
Yeah.
Remember to use promo code SHEED.
Casual. That's exactly what he's doing. Talking at his side of his neck, man.
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in Sheed because I'm gonna be honest with you. I would have expected
disappointed too.
Bonzi, the player that probably was more of a role player on that side of the spectrum than he was of a star. But Rasheed definitely at his peak was regarded more as one of the all-star level or star caliber players in the league in the 2000s. And so for him to choose to go the route of being more emotional than actually spitting game to Anthony Edwards, giving him some educational knowledge, something he could be able to take home with him, that's very disappointing. I'm not even gonna lie to you. And I also want to go out of saying this because I didn't get to, I haven't said it on this platform. I've said it on other platforms, but the biggest disappointment I have with former players like Rasheed Wallace, former players like Kevin Garnett, former players like Magic Johnson, one of the greatest of all time, top 10 for some people. I'm disappointed in the fact that you decide to use this opportunity. And let me put myself on. I'm disappointed in niggas like Magic Johnson and niggas like Kevin Garnett and niggas like Rasheed Wallace apparently because you instead of using that quote and that time that you were on the camera to be able to point out the flaws in Anthony Edwards' logic, to be able to educate him on that era that you played in or that era that you witnessed, instead of you using that opportunity for you to be able to put him on game, you instead selfishly, might I add, you use that opportunity to sort of swipe at him as if he ain't done enough, or as if he's beneath your knowledge. He's beneath you putting him on game. But yeah, y'all be the same ones to talk about how the new generation don't know nothing, or how the new generation don't want to listen to nobody, but y'all don't even give them the opportunity to showcase that they have listening qualities. That is very, very disappointing.